Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell. Trying to have a couple too many conversations.
Where's Sarah Cricky?
Right before going on the air. She should be with us. Sarah? Maybe.
Sarah?
Maybe not.
Sarah.
Mortgage genius.
There
Where are we? There we are.
Yay.
Good morning.
Hey, how's it going over in the mortgage world? I haven't talked to you, so you know.
It's been busy.
That's why I haven't talked to you.
Under a rock.
So it's interesting. One of your topics for today's show is things that can actually delay closing. We haven't seen any of those.
Oh, we've had our fair share. I've got some tips to help.
Before you dive into that, let me just toot your horn and give you a shout out, because we had a customer that was adamant about going with Wells, whatever their bank's name is. And we were like, we really should try our local lender. They're awesome. So they had the file for 3 months. And literally a week before closing, nobody's calling them back. Buyer doesn't have a copy of the appraisal. Like, nothing's happening. And so I said, this is not going to happen. Like, you need to change lenders, because there's no way it's closing even next week when it's supposed to. So she did. And Sarah literally did in less than 3 weeks what took them more than 3 months to do.
Wow.
And she got it closed with a better rate and amazing customer service.
2.5. Yeah, give her credit.
So I said less than 3 weeks.
Hey, now Sarah, I have a good question for you before we dive too far in, because I've never seen this before. But I had a client wrote a policy for him. Mortgage company came back and said we needed to reduce it by $8. That's $8 total, not $8 a month. Have you seen that before?
$8 total.
It's insane. It's crazy to get that kind of request, and it seems surreal that why would you have to do that? But the automated underwriting systems are very, very particular, and something like $1 literally can throw an automated approval off. I mean,
Wow.
I'm going to speculate that might have been the reason. That's normally the reason.
That's what I said.
So when that happens, they look for ways to control that total mortgage payment. If there's something small, if there's a small adjustment that can be made to keep the client's debt ratio in line.
You'll laugh about his answer because it just doesn't work for what you guys need. But tell her what you said.
Oh, I was like, man, I'd rather just give you $8 than go to.
It's like, it doesn't work like that.
I've literally had, unfortunately, scenarios where the automated underwrite was literally teetering over an approval $3 lower than not. And no matter how strong the credit score is, if you go 1/16 of a percent too high on what they call their maximum debt ratio, it will give an automatic denial.
Wow.
And then the lender has to find a solution.
It's very black and white. It's refer or accept.
Wow.
It's
Correct.
like, a refer means we're not doing it. Accept means we'll take the loan.
And you think about how much money is wasted on the time to put the paperwork together to move something $3.
It's a lot.
Absolutely. 100% agree
Wow.
with that. Yep.
Hey, got to get it done, though.
You guys think you have paperwork? You should see what she has to upload into the system.
I do not envy you or Amy. I'm sure Amy's email inbox is like 500 a day.
She deals with a lot of moving parts on top of COVID and homeschooling a small child.
Oh, goodness. God bless her. I couldn't do it.
Yep. Yeah. So, but just back to in terms of how a closing can be delayed. There's the kind of the given the things that you shouldn't do, which will definitely delay your closing, like make a large purchase, use your credit, quit your job.
Don't buy a car. Go get new furniture. I tell people, don't buy a car for the garage you don't yet have. Don't buy furniture for a house you don't yet own.
Over and beyond that.
What about
especially
taxes?
now. Pardon?
What about taxes? I heard filing taxes could be an issue. Have you seen any of that?
Well, I mean, we're dealing with right now a tax extension. So people have until the 15th of this month to file or extend. A lender can only require what you're legally supposed to do. So by July the 15th, you'll either A, have to produce your 2019 tax return, or B, produce evidence that you did extend your taxes.
Which you're allowed to do.
If you're dealing with a tax liability where you owe the IRS money, they're going to expect A, either payment in full of that tax liability, or B, that you have an approved payment plan that you budget for with the IRS. And the challenge there, especially with COVID, is that it's taking months for that stuff to occur. So definitely want to be proactive with regards to that and communicate with the loan officer and the lender where that's concerned.
You want about taxes? You can comment on this, Sarah. One time I had a customer, you remember Shannon, where somebody else conveniently filed her tax refund for her. And, that when it went through the process with the lender, they said, your tax returns don't match what you gave us. And that's because somebody else filed a false return. Yeah,
unfortunately that happens. And for some folks, that's how they discover that they've been the victim of identity theft, especially a lot of folks that don't have to file taxes. And then at that point, you're dealing with an IRS advocate, and you're months in to get it resolved.
Can you imagine that in the middle of a loan? And that's how you find out.
Yeah, we have had that happen. But, with regards to delays, and especially with COVID, going back to don't make large purchases, buy vehicles, open new credit, most investors are credit monitoring. So they're pulling your credit to qualify you for the loan, and normally that credit pull is good for 3 to 4 months, but they're also monitoring you kind of on a soft pull basis to see if anything has changed. So, we'll have scenarios where some folks will have opened credit 2 months ago, it hasn't reported yet, and then it hits during the mortgage process. They didn't disclose it because they thought it was there, and then we have to figure it out and make sure that everything's fine. So it's different on a case-by-case basis, but the best course of action is to be really conservative with your use of credit while you're under application and qualifying for your mortgage loan. Couple things that are a little different than just, like I said, your standard don't quit your job, don't make a major purchase is right now due to COVID, especially with businesses opening, then closing, then opening again, furloughed employees, self-employed people, depending on their industry, are experiencing a lack of income. So verifications of employment aren't just occurring at the beginning of the process and at the end, they've gotten a little tighter on those guidelines. So, for example, in a normal environment, we would verify employment up front, and then about 10 days before closing, someone in corporate, a processor, an underwriter would pick up the phone and verbally verify, yes, the person still does work there. That's not the case now. Now it's a lot more restrictive. It has to be verified within 72 hours. The employer has to state that the hours haven't been reduced or impacted by COVID. And what we run into that could potentially delay a closing is a lot of these companies, even their HR departments, are working remote. So it can be challenging to reach a human being that's verifiable as an employee to verify this. For some folks, they're working from home off their cell phone, and that's not a verifiable phone number that can be linked back to an employer. So we then have to rely on an employer's email. And for some of the larger companies, they outsource these verifications to companies called the Work Number. So where you can go online and pull an instant Work Number verification, it may be 2 weeks old, dated for the last payroll period. So some things that consumers can do to ensure the timeliness of that is to plan ahead. Have a supervisor, have an HR contact that's expecting an email or a phone call that can respond quickly because otherwise we're in it's fire. We're in a panic mode 72 hours before the closing because we can't reach a human being to verify they work there even though we know that they do.
And
What
pay
about-
stubs don't work for that?
No, they've got to re-verify everything.
Ugh,
No.
what a pain in the butt.
Sarah, what about the ones that were furloughed and are back? What are they doing about that gap in employment? Are they disregarding that?
They're not holding it against them. I mean, we want to make loans to people that it's not their fault that they went through that hardship. So, for example, we have clients that were furloughed for 3 months. We simply ask the employer to comment from when to when they were out of work, and we take that time unpaid out of the equation when we're factoring in the
That's
debt.
good. That's
nice.
good.
And the income. We also ask them to comment, of course, that not only have they returned, but they've returned to a normal schedule in terms of the average hours they typically work, and that they're not going to experience any additional reduction, due to the COVID event that's foreseeable.
Yeah, they're making sure those employment situations are tight. Thanks, Sarah, for joining us again.
My pleasure. You all have a great weekend, okay?
Yes, absolutely. If you want to connect with myself, Sarah, Adam, any of our guests, 813-377-2775, 813-377-2775. Oh, I did?
Yeah.
No, I thought it was me.
Yeah. So welcome back to Tampa Home Talk. We are figuring out how to use the Comrex for the first time. And
Katrina, you got COVID, Katrina? I heard you coughing.
No,
under
Katrina has her regular allergies. I thought I muted my mic. I'm sorry. I muted Adam, not me. My bad. No.
Oh.
And that was loud. I'm sorry.
yeah, it's okay. We're back. We're back.
Hence my voice.
We're going to recover.
Issues still.
Hey, Pat, before we get started, I wanted to let you know, and I think this is good for our listeners because we didn't talk about RVs and stuff, but he said he does a lot of RVs, and he can redo the tub in there for you, or the shower.
Perfect. He's coming over.
You know what? That's good, too. I didn't think about that because with those RVs and campers, over time, they get yellow, and it's like gross looking.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's where mine is right now, and I've seen some pictures of it. They look brand new.
Yeah.
I never would have thought about that.
So my grandfather, when he was alive, he had a trailer at a fish camp out in Lake Wales, and is it hard water or soft, whatever turns everything that nasty, it almost looks like it's rusted.
Oh, that would be
Hard water.
Hard water, yeah. Oh man, that was
No, but the plastic in the campers or the RVs actually yellows
yeah.
over time. They always do. It's like so gross looking, but they do.
Yeah. Well,
Anyway, so let's hop on over to Alvy Griffith. He is one of our newest partners. Thank you.
Welcome.
And he's with Robertson Survey, and they are the guys that go out and tell you where your boundary lines are to make sure that your home is where it's supposed to be when you're getting ready to build it, and that you know exactly where it's going to be. You were talking about staking out a construction site, right?
Yeah, we run into these all the time. Everyone today's in a big hurry for everything, and we get a lot of house plans where, unfortunately, not everything is the exact same width as the property appraiser thinks. And we have home plans sometimes based off of that, and people want us to stake that and build the home, and literally it sometimes doesn't fit because they're using every inch of that property.
Wow.
And we've had people that have had to redo home plans because of that.
We got a question, actually.
That's not a question. That's a statement.
No. The building layout doesn't fit.
A building layout that would not fit on a lot since the building plans were started without a survey and the architect assumed that lot measurements were shown on the property appraiser's website.
See, yeah,
Period.
but I can't
Yeah,
imagine
there's no
somebody
question
would
there.
start doing that without a survey.
It happens all the time.
wow.
And of course, I can't blame the architect. They're asked to do a job. They go with the best available information they have.
Somebody's going to give them money, right?
So can we talk about that? Like, at what point do you discover that? And it's like, now what?
It really
Is
should.
that at the end?
No, that's not the end. Usually, the resolution is the architect will revise the plan somewhat, depending on what that difference is. It could be a fairly substantial revision.
How hard is it to go, like, if you got to shave off like 6 inches? Is that pretty hard on a, as well, I guess that's a Leo question too, for an architect. Is that pretty difficult to do, or are you just 6 inches short on one side of the drawing there?
It would depend on the house. I'll let Leo speak to it, of course, but it would depend on the house and what the design is. We do work with some architects that have specifically stopped setting everything at the minimum 7-foot setback on lots that we work with, and making sure they're in a little bit of an inch leeway either side. It's usually not much difference, but if I stake it and it's incorrect and they have to get a variance or there's a problem with the house, Robertson's liable. So
Wow.
I can't do it.
Yeah.
What about neighbors disputing boundary lines? Like, they both have a survey, somebody built something, and now someone's saying, hey, it's a couple feet off on my property line or whatever.
We just recently had one like that. The neighbor to the north had their survey. The neighbor that was building had their survey, and then the builder called us in as a third party to do a verification as to what we thought the boundary was.
So what happened?
What happened is our determination was that the house was 2 foot further north than it should have been. We believe it was caused by multiple corners in one spot, which you end up with in these older subdivisions. It was about a 2-foot difference. And we believe what happened was the corner further to the north was used for the staking of the house, as opposed to what we thought was the right corner.
So someone's survey was wrong.
It's really subjective. There are a lot of ways you could argue either case. It'll most likely will end up in be decided by a judge, I would think.
Wow. So I mean, you would think it would be so black and white, right? Like you're mapping it out.
It should be, but a lot of these plats, especially in the Tampa area, date back to the 1880s, 1920s. Very minimal information on them. There weren't nearly as many requirements for all the geometric information, so there's error that's been pushed around over literally decades.
How was that discovered?
It was sort of a neighbor complaint, really. The neighbor is on the north, is already there, lives there, and sees the home being built to the south of them, and by their eye, I guess, they thought it was a little bit too close to their property line because they know it's generally a 7-foot setback.
And they were right?
That's our opinion, that they were right and that their surveyor was right, and the builder's surveyor, unfortunately, was incorrect.
Were they in the middle of building?
They had foundation in and also walls up. It was not a completed house, but it definitely was substantially along the way.
So did they have to tear it down and restart, or?
I haven't heard back yet. This is only a week or so
a better
ago.
question is, do they have to cease and desist operations till they figure it out?
That would be up to a judge or up to the contractor.
Just curious, like if you saw which way that was going.
I would think common sense would say that you stop building until this thing is completely resolved.
Yeah.
There are definitely better ways to resolve it than tearing it down. But
Buy
that's
the land from buy the land.
That happens. We get a lot of those where we have a neighbor that's purchasing a foot of land, 2 foot of land from the neighbor, and it all depends on how cooperative the neighbors are. And if they're not, then perhaps a judge orders that later.
Talk about that process. Because that's a great question. When a neighbor wants to buy a foot or 2 foot of land, what's the process?
In that case, we would survey both lots to either side, and we would work with the client to determine what portion of land it is they want to buy, and we would prepare a legal description and sketch of that, and provided the client was happy with that, we would then document that in the field by placing monuments at the new corners of the lot plus whatever portion they happen to buy.
Yeah. You don't think often about people like buying a foot or two or dividing or shaving off a foot or two, but it's the same process as splitting it, right? You have to provide new legal descriptions.
Mm-hmm. There's new legal descriptions for each side. It's not as complicated as doing what you would call a certified parcel. Or a subdivision plat. It's fairly simple, and we see it constantly throughout the Tampa Bay area, where it's a foot or 2 or 3 foot, and you can sometimes tell by the houses and their dimensions relative to the property line that they did that because of a similar reason. Someone built the house a little too close.
Yeah, that would make sense. And then, so the process to split it, let's talk about this, because this is one of my favorite things. We've done a lot of these. A bigger parcel, they want to split it into 2 or sometimes more than 2. Talk about the process to do that.
So the general rule there, and I'm speaking from Hillsborough County rules, is if the parcel hasn't been split before, it's not already a subdivided piece of land, you can split it into 2 pieces and do what they call a certified parcel process. It's probably a 2-month process. It's not incredibly intensive. If you want to split it more than once, or if it's already been split before, then you're going to have to do a subdivision plat. And that process can go anywhere from 2 months to 6 months or a year, especially going through the county, because various departments review it. Water, wastewater, transportation, survey, real estate, zoning. Everybody has their hands in that.
Let's talk about both of those separately for a moment. So if you're dividing a parcel, normally you get the whole thing surveyed, if it's not already surveyed. Mm-hmm. Do you rely on an old one and then walk the property with them to figure out where they want to split it, and then do 2 new drawings with 2 new legals to submit to the county, right?
Right. But we would maybe rely on an old survey for informational purposes only, but we always do our own boundary survey. And it's required that you have a boundary survey that's no older than 6 months upon the submittal.
So for the whole thing, plus the 2 new parcels.
Right. A boundary survey for the entire area, and then 2 separate boundary surveys, assuming it's split into 2 for whatever we split it into.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty cool, fun process. We've done that many, many times. Can we chat a little bit more about the subdivision process? So let's say it's a much larger tract. Maybe it's, 2 acres in an area that's like Pinellas County. It's really built up. And they want to divide that into more than 2 pieces.
Yeah, those become a lot more complicated just because of the geometry that's needed for, let's say it's going to be 5 or 6 lots, and also because they're going to need to put in infrastructure. They're going to need to put in roads,
Have you
sanitary
done those,
water.
the surveys for the subdivision plots?
Yes, we've done quite a few like that.
Awesome. Can we talk about that in detail when we come back right after the break?
Of course.
Awesome. Hey, if you got a question, maybe a boundary line dispute, you want to double check your survey, maybe your survey is so old you need a new one because you got to put up a fence or a shed or something like that in the back, call or text 813-377-2775. We'll get you connected with Alvy, 813-377-2775. Again, you can call or text that number, 813-377-2775. We'll be back. Stick around just a moment.
Well, good morning. Welcome back. This is Leo Kane with Beryl Engineering and Inspection. Everyone's sucking down mints, so it's my turn to chatty chat.
I love when we play the finger pointing game on who's going to take us out.
It's just
a little bit
stare.
more fun.
It's
Yeah.
just a little stare.
I've got nothing left.
It's like a Mexican standoff, but who wants to talk?
Subdivision plat survey updates.
We just had a caller.
Uh-huh.
We actually had 3 callers. They wanted to know what the phone number was from Leo.
Oh, it's 813-377-2. Oh, my actual phone number? 2775?
No, the Katrina Madewell number.
Okay, so it's
The one that you always give.
813-377-2775.
Now, how'd they get your number, Pat, without,
808-404-1010. That's a pretty easy one. That one's given out like
knows that
1,000 times a day.
Yeah, you don't have to remember much. Just the 888 and the 404 in the middle.
1010.
And Money Talk 1010.
Love it. All right, surveys.
So
Elevation certificates.
Well, we were asking Alvy right before the break about the
platting
subdivision plots.
Yeah, about carving out a subdivision and just making all the lots and the meets and bounds and all the meats and potatoes.
That would be so fun and like fascinating.
It's really one of the more interesting parts of surveying, and it's rewarding too, because eventually we get to see a subdivision. Many homes and families living there.
Walk it through us step by step by step. I know there's a lot of moving parts, but as much as you can in about 10 minutes.
Your first step is going to be a boundary survey of the entire area. Let's say it's 20 acres. Sometimes anticipating construction on an area like that, we're generally going to collect all of the trees and elevations for that property as well, because that's going to be needed later for the civil engineering plans to put in the roadways, the drainage structures, retention ponds, and things such as that.
Now, why the trees?
Because there are tree credits depending on which trees you keep and which trees that you take away.
I did not know that.
And that even applies to a single family lot. So if we have a lot and they're taking out a 40-inch oak, then they're going to have to replace 40 inches of trees somewhere on the project. So it's all the way from 1,000-acre subdivisions down to a 50 by 100-foot lot.
Wow. Now, those 1,000-acre subdivisions, right? Those are usually meets and bounds surveys.
Yeah, those are generally those are going to be large tracts of land, and meets and bounds survey it's going to be part of the public land survey system. It's going to be part of a land section or sections of land, depending on how big it is.
And those are more expensive to do. They take you guys a lot more time, and they're long.
Right.
Those legal descriptions are so long.
And it's not just those 1,000-acre subdivisions. We do single-family residences where those are meets and bounds descriptions. And if we're not fortunate enough to find corners that are already there very close to the property or on the property we're surveying, we may have to go literally a mile away and start doing what we call break down that section in order to determine the northwest quarter of the northwest quarter of the southeast quarter.
Yeah, it was funny. Mimi actually had a question on the real estate exam she was working on. It was survey related, and I couldn't answer. I'm gonna have to have her bring it so you can answer, because I'm like, I don't remember. Like, I don't. This is a surveyor question.
I hope I get it right.
Yeah, I would call my surveyor and ask this. I don't remember. All right. So the subdivision, have the whole thing surveyed. Then what?
And then you start working with the client as to how many lots they want to break it into, what type of configuration it's going to be. Sometimes it's a simple configuration with a road down the middle and lots perpendicular to either side. I'll square it off like a parking lot. More than likely, there's going to be cul-de-sacs and what we call eyebrow cul-de-sacs, which is kind of a half cul-de-sac, and it makes the roads in the neighborhood a little prettier.
And I know builders are going to want to fit as many.
I've never heard that before. What's an eyebrow cul-de-sac?
Like a pull-off almost, like a half cul-de-sac.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a kind of a bulge in it.
The street keeps going, but it just kind of.
He's going to draw it out for you. So you
Yeah,
can see
I
it.
didn't bring a pen, but yeah,
That's okay. We'll hold it up to the camera later, so we can put it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Don't forget to
surveyors are
find us
like
on
engineers.
YouTube.
We can't talk without drawing something, so kind of like that, as opposed to
It's a piece.
the entire circle.
So now we got to describe that for our listeners.
Oh, okay. I can do that easily. So instead of being like a full door handle, doorknob, a full circle, it's just a little half circle.
You said eyebrow.
He did say eyebrow. I don't know. It raised an eyebrow, though.
All right. So figure out what fits where, and what about the builders that want to put as many split lots on there as possible?
That's every builder ever created. That is another thing we have to work with them on, and we have to work with the county or the city to determine how much conservation area they're going to require, how much they're going to require as far as drainage retention, if any. There are lots of considerations as to how much of that land is going to be usable for single-family residences or apartments. Or
So,
whatever.
so I have a question for you. How does that work when you have townhouses, right? So the people own the townhouse, right? They own that land, but everything's really, really close. Is it more difficult to do those, or?
Not really. The main thing with the townhouses is they own up to the center of their wall in between the neighbors.
Right.
And they're very similar to a condominium in that they have their townhouse, which comprises a lot of that subdivision.
Right.
And then they have common areas as well, similar to a condominium.
And then a backyard, hopefully.
Yeah, and usually a little backyard. Yeah.
Surveyed a little differently.
Yeah.
Plotted out legally a little differently.
Yeah, we had a situation with a plat that we did that had some townhomes where the plat that we did not perfectly agree with what the floor plan was of the townhomes that were built. However, it resolved itself because the property line in between the units ended up between the walls anyway. The only issue would be if someone wanted to argue that I want all 4 inches of my half of the wall as opposed to I only got 2 inches, but
As long as it doesn't burn down,
hasn't
I guess
happened
it's
yet.
not a problem.
everything's fine.
Now, on those townhomes, do the people that live on the corners, do they own a little bit on the outside too, or they're just strictly?
Sometimes.
It depends on the plat.
Yeah.
It's going to depend on the plat. Sometimes they do have a little bit more on the corners, generally do, as far as the townhomes are concerned.
If they're a true townhome, not like one of these townhomes where it's condo
Well,
style.
a townhome that requires a survey that has some land in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll usually have the corner units are almost always a little bit bigger, a little bit wider, and then they may also have some land to the side of them that the others do not have. It depends on whether that land is dedicated for common use for everyone in the townhome subdivision, or if it's dedicated to that particular lot.
Alvy, what are the biggest things that you see with the subdivision plots? Like, what typically gets hung up a lot with the counties? What's the hardest part?
The hardest part is really the county review, just because it's so extensive and involves so many departments there. And at times, the comments you get from one department may conflict with what the other department wants to do. The other thing that
Can you give us an example?
perhaps zoning wants to have each lot, let's say, 50 feet wide, but maybe transportation wants a wider lot or a skinnier lot. That's not a real example. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. But
So they would have to get a variance from one department or another?
yeah, or you'd have to communicate with both departments and come to some type of resolution. Other times, we run into issues with comments that don't necessarily violate a rule, but is more of a personal preference of the reviewer. And that one's a hard one to navigate because that's the person that's going to approve or disapprove your plat. However, they are not applying the rules correctly, in our opinion, sometimes.
Where's the biggest bottlenecks though? Like where's the hardest part usually to get through?
The actual review of the survey and the documentation that goes along with the backing up of the subdivision plat, all of the title work. There's an ownership and encumbrance report for 30 years stating who has owned that property over the last 30 years. There's GPS surveying that has to be done. Closure report for each lot has to be done to make sure everything mathematically checks. And that's where some of those older plats literally almost fall apart because they didn't have that ability to perform that very close mathematical check, and that's where we end up with discrepancies. So that's looked at very thoroughly.
Now I know like on smaller little plats, like let's say it's a decent sized piece of land, but you're platting it into a little cul-de-sac with 5 or 6 homes on it compared to like huge parcels. Like Lennar just bought a really big parcel. It's going to be like whole neighborhoods. How long, like what's the range on how long that takes to get that through? Because that's a long process.
Even on a smaller one, I would estimate 2 to 3 months for a plat to go through. A lot of that's going to depend on what area it's in. Is it in City of Tampa? Is it Pasco County? Is it Hillsborough County? Is it Pinellas County? It's going to depend on their rules and which reviewers happen to look at it sometimes.
And the bigger ones?
The bigger ones, those could be
Years, right?
for everything.
Yeah.
Such as Lennar that you mentioned. I think they purchased a few thousand acres in Pasco recently, if I'm correct.
They did, you're right.
And all the permitting and everything that's going to go with that, and even just the geometry of the land that'll be a year's process.
What do you mean the geometry of the land?
The size of the lots. Is the lot 50 foot by 100 for every lot? Is there a cul-de-sac? How wide are the angles of the lots for the cul-de-sac? Do the cul-de-sacs abut a conservation area? What's the wetland limits of that conservation area? That's another part of the initial survey process, as well as determining what, if any, wetlands are on that property.
So where do they start with that? Like they look to see where the wetlands are? Like when you think about the whole thing on how it's going to be and where the roads are going to go?
Yeah, usually if there are wetlands, that's going to be the first thing you're going to need to look at, because once those are identified and surveyed and placed on our survey, usually we have to have a 30-foot setback from those wetland lines before you would have any actual construction going on.
So that could determine how and where they draw it out.
Definitely. It could even determine whether it's a suitable piece of property to even build on if we're talking one of those smaller 2-acre ones, because depending on what zoning you're in, you may have to have an acre of upland with no wetland in it at all, and you may not be able to even build what you want on it.
That question, look, you did.
Well, no. Well, see, with the wetlands, so what I find really curious sometimes is when we're doing flood insurance and the back of the house is in an AE zone and the front of the house is in an X zone.
A little piece in the back.
Yeah, and then the mortgage company still wants that flood insurance
He's
policy.
a good one to talk about that. It can actually be pulled out.
And in those cases,
You can LOMA it.
you can do a LOMA, or what we've done in many
Can you
cases.
explain what a LOMA is?
It's a land area map adjustment.
Which is?
That's where you pull it out of the flood zone, which he was in the middle of saying when you.
I'm sorry.
It stands for Letter of Map Revision.
There it is.
It's an amendment to the FEMA maps. You can do that. We actually have worked with a company that does some of that for clients. A lot of that's going to be coming up because the flood maps are changing.
Woohoo!
Yeah,
We
for
had
the
a guy
worse.
that did really well on that because we've seen that where it really shouldn't be in a flood zone and it needs to be pulled out. And then, I don't know, we just kind of went a little bit.
I see it in like the new Tampa area a lot because you got flatwoods out there. You got a lot of like wooded areas where you might have Hunter's Green or something like that backs up into it. And I've seen it a lot out there. Tampa Palms.
But I guess when we return, I'll answer that question, Adam, as
Awesome.
to when it's in 2 zones and what do we do.
Yeah.
Off air number?
813-377-2775. That's 813-377-2775. One more time for the people listening at home.
Call or text.
813-377-2775. Call, text, send us a meme. We'll love it.
Thanks for listening, y'all. We're here with Alvy Griffith with Robertson Survey. We will be back right after the quick break to talk about what happens when that teeny tiny little portion in the back is a flood zone and the rest of your home is not.
Boom.
Back in a moment.
Well, good morning. Welcome back. This is Tampa Home Talk. This is Leo Kane. I'm joined with Daniel Jimenez with Bath and Tile Restoration, answering all of your tile and bath restoration needs.
He does a little bit more too. We're going to talk about that as well.
So at what point do you make a difference between I want to reglaze regrout versus replace the grout, replace the tile? At what point does tile, is it too old? Does it ever get too old for touch-up?
Well, it depends upon the usage of it. If, for example, if it's recessed grout lines, and you get that on older models in which the grout lines become deeper, and until you have to refill them. Sometimes we just basically scratch the grout lines and just regrout it, and that's what you should do.
So does it make it slippery when you regrout it, or not regrout it, when you reglaze the tub?
Oh yes, it becomes slippery. So the tub actually,
Adam's like, can't be.
When you resurface the bathtub, it's very slippery, very shiny. That's why we provide a non-skid surface on the bottom of the tub so that you don't fall.
Good idea. Good idea. How long does that last?
Well, typically, if you use it properly and go according to what we put on our warranty, it should last you 15 to 20 years.
Wow.
When do you know it's time to reglaze it again?
Well, when it starts to peel, or starts to fade, or it just doesn't, it holds, because see, a lot of people abuse the tubs, but they don't intentionally do it. It's sort of like they use abrasive cleaners, or they don't clean it at all, and the soap scum eats into the finish, and eventually it gets dull again. That's why I highly recommend that if you get a brand new tub or resurfaced tub, all you have to do after you take a shower is just dry out the tub. Because basically what you're doing is eliminating any buildup of soap scum. That's the problem.
Nobody dries out their tub, but we redid our shower.
I'm just giving you the basic
Now,
advice.
do you dry out your tub? As a
Okay,
tub professional.
I take showers.
Okay.
And what I do regularly, religiously, I get my squeegee and I just basically take all the droplets off the doors.
We paid ridiculous money for our showers, so I squeegee.
And I wipe down the frame, and I haven't used any Windex or any kind of cleaners for nearly 3 years. It's always shiny, always clean.
Wow.
It's called regularly cleaning it. That's all.
So we know most people are not going to wipe down their tub when they're out. We just know they don't. Everybody's busy, right?
When you have teenagers
Yes.
and you have
They're
family,
definitely not gonna do it.
But that's why the cleaning agency, the cleaning industry is making billions of dollars because people just don't want to do that. But
Somebody will do it.
That somebody else would do it, yes.
So what do you use on the surface? Like, is there any particular chemicals you should or should not use on it to clean it?
Well, you shouldn't use any abrasive cleaners like Comet or Ajax and any of that. They especially have these silicates material in it that basically wears down the finish, and as a result, you're back to square one. That's why we recommend things like Lysol tub and towel cleaner, scrubbing bubbles.
What about bleach? Some of that stuff has bleach in it.
Bleach is kind of harsh. You could use it if diluted. Okay. There's a product that we really like a lot that breaks down the soap scum. It's called TSP, and you can get that over at Lowe's or Home Depot.
Got it. And do you do this in any other colors, or is there any other colors?
The tubs?
Or is it just white? Yeah, the reglaze.
We could do any color.
Wow.
From a ground color to any kind of pastel color.
You can get that blue bathtub you always wanted.
It just reminds me of all those old homes that you walk into that were built in like the 60s, and they have like a pink bathtub or a blue bathtub, or you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You've seen those.
Well,
The avocado green from the 70s.
From a cosmetic point of view or an optical point of view, I think that the smaller the tub, you should have brighter colors. I mean, the smaller the units. If the bathroom is like a 5x8, and that's a small bathroom, why would you want to use dark colors to make the bathroom look smaller? Mm-hmm. You want to use brighter colors like whites or pastels, so that it optically gives you the
I tell you what, I remember like in the 90s too, they did a lot of like purple, pink, and teal, and I never understood that.
Harvest Gold is another one too. Don't forget that.
That was from the 50s, wasn't
Yes.
it? Yeah.
And olive.
Olive is 70s.
Yes. My grandmother still has an olive bathroom in her house.
She can reglaze it if she wants to.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does it cost to reglaze one of those typical older style tubs.
For just a bathtub, we run it about $350.
And then you can do the tile too, right?
Yeah, the tile, we charge about $10 a square foot for that.
What is, like, for those average small bathtubs or bathrooms, what does that look like usually?
Okay, when we resurface a tub and tile, normally it's just tile, a tub surrounded by 3 walls of tile. That's about it. But if you have the wainscot that extends itself, well, that's like $10 a square foot. But normally, if we're going to do a tub and tile, the normal pricing is going to be between $700 to $800.
Okay, which is good. It's way
not too
cheaper than
bad.
ripping everything
Yeah.
out and replacing
But that
all the tile.
that doesn't include regrouting, because sometimes we have to regrout,
Right.
And that's an extra charge on that.
Right, because you got to make sure the foundation.
But it lasts 15 years, you said. So, I mean,
if you take
good care of it.
I've seen inadequate, bad preparatory work, and I've seen them last 10, 15 years just on that alone. So
Wow.
the materials that they use now, the technology that they have in these products now are so advanced that there's no real excuse. If you really prepare it properly, there's no reason why it shouldn't last you 15, 20 years easy.
Now, one of the cool things that most reglazers do is also the countertops.
Oh, yeah.
So
That's,
let's talk about that, because I love, this is a really solid option, for a lot of your entry level starter homes. I mean, it makes it look so great.
Okay, we have 2 areas. You see this countertop right here? This is what you call a multi-stone or multi-spec look. And we can give you what they call a sandy look. A lot of people like that, and that's one those are the ones application. The other application is the epoxies. The epoxies are a little more expensive, a lot more durable, but they look like marble when it's done. We pour this material on after we condition the countertop, and people are amazed that it looks like, oh, wow, there's like marble, and it's amazing.
So is it shiny?
Very shiny.
Okay.
However, we do have more of a matte finish if that's what a person requires.
What's the maintenance on that? And is there any care instructions you should know about, like?
Depending upon what you want. If you just want the multi-stone, it's going to cost you about 5 years warranty on that. But the other one, the epoxy, it could go from 10, 15, 20 years easy.
I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. People put hot pans or plates on them. Does it ruin it?
Okay, yes, it would. That's why you have to make sure that you instruct the customer that please get a heat pad or some sort of what you call those things again?
Can it be repaired if they do that?
It's going to be difficult. You'd have to repair the entire thing. That's why we instruct them.
Got
Please
it.
get a my mind is evading.
All right.
What do you call those carving things?
Yes, our music's running in, so we're out of time anyway. If you want to get some information about this, or you got the old style Formica, talk to our guest, Daniel. I promise it looks amazing when they are done. We are at 813-377-2775. Again, 813-377-2775. Love where you live, or I'll fix it. Stick around for hour number 2.